Means meeting for the Ways and Means meeting for 7/14/2021 is now in session. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hallelujah. Oh, that's the best that sounded.
Band back together.
Thank you, everyone. It's exciting to actually see so many faces again. I'm sure by the end of the night I might regret that, but that's okay. Welcome back, and let's get started. Seeing nobody in the room for public participation, we'll move on to the next item, and that would be committee organization. This is the annual time of the year where this committee reorganizes and elects a new chair and a new vice chair. So at this point in time, I would entertain a motion for the chairperson.
I nominate Stephen Morrow.
Right, I second.
Sarah, second. Does anybody else care to make a motion at this point? No.
Do you want us to?
No, I humbly accept your confidence that I can continue on for another year, so thank you very much. David, welcome. Thank you. So I need a vote. All those in favor?
Nomination on the floor for Steve for chair.
Yes.
And Jaya says.
Jaya says yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So that's 9-0. I will now need a motion for a vice chair. Is there a second?
Second.
I think John said he would be happy to continue onward, but he's not here. But I was told that you could vote somebody in as vice chair even if they weren't here. So I'm happy to have him continue. Is there anybody have a contrary motion? Okay, seeing no motions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, 9-0. All right, another year. Okay, moving on. Account transfers. We'll start with the DPW. Doug?
So, is here, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I think that's the chair.
So, Steve and I met as a subcommittee, Sonia couldn't make it, with John and just got an overview. I think this is a pretty detailed presentation, so I think it's important that he give the presentation. Also, I would ask that after we discuss this transfer, he may have a little bit of information for us for what we're looking at for water filtering and some future insight into what we might be looking at as costs.
Mr. Sanchez.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having us tonight on this request for transfer. Notice that I've never seen you guys here for a request for transfer ever, this committee. I think this is a first for DPW. Unfortunately, we did have a major sewer blockage in April of this year at the intersection of Middlesex Turnpike and Bedford Street, where the Bamboo restaurant is. And what happened was on the Thursday, which I believe was the 15th rather, we were doing routine I&I work. As we do every other year, we go out and investigate the pipes and the manholes, et cetera. And the contractor that we hired to do that, as he was actually trying to go out the pipe, he found the blockage. He found the blockage in this pipe. The good news about that was that when he found it, we had not had an overflow yet, because he actually found it in the pipe. So immediately we went and responded the typical way we do. We tried to get through all the blockages trenchless, whether it is through the Vector, jet trucks, root cutters, and everything in between. After losing a couple of root cutters and hoses for the Vector, we knew that we were just not going to get anywhere doing it that way, and we had to actually excavate. Of course, it's April, and it's been raining this year, so the groundwater table was as high as the road itself. If you've seen the brook, even if you want to see it today, it's right through the bridge. And the main matters for is the road is all gravel and sand, which means that the water table was very high and very fast. So we started excavating that Friday, dewatering, excavating, dewatering, excavating. And through the weekend, we took one day pretty much off to figure out if we needed to go a different route, because obviously we were going very slow. The traditional way that you use to excavate pipes that deep, by the way, this pipe is close to 14 feet deep in the ground. In areas that are full of groundwater, is you have to set well points. You typically hire a company just to do that. They actually drill wells along the road, set up pumping, pump the water out for many days. Once the groundwater table gets to a certain point that you can work, then you go ahead and dig and do the work. That is a very expensive proposition, particularly during an emergency. We looked at the alternatives at that point and how much we thought, this is Tom Hay and I, by the way, thinking about it, that it just was going to be actually more effective for us to do the work ourselves, even though it may be harder, save some money doing it that way. So it took us probably about a week to actually get to the pipe. And when we found the pipe and were able to cut it, what we found was a solid mass of grease with wipes. They actually couldn't even pull it out. They had to actually cut it to be able to get it out of the pipe.
Biodegradable wipes.
Yes, as they say in the commercials, am I right? By the way, those wipes, and this is for the people at home, they are not flushable. You're not supposed to flush them. They do not biodegrade. And what they do instead is they create these problems for us, as well as problems with the pump stations. And that goes, also I mentioned to the subcommittee earlier today that we tried to bypass the sewer while we did the work with our pumps, but because of those wipes, our pumps would plug up. The longest we went was half an hour before they plugged up again. So instead of doing it that way, we had to actually hire a truck to pump it out and go downstream and dump it. So, and they did that for a week. That's why we have this price tag. The good news is, though, we did not have an overflow. And the work got done by our forces. We did have to hire a contractor because it was deep. We can't go that deep with our backhoe. But other than that, I mean, the work just took a long time, took a lot of effort, but we completed it within that week. And then the following week, Highway Division went out and actually patched the road and paved it. So that's the story on that one big mess that we had on the turnpike. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Can you just define the term I&I for the audience?
Yes, that's infiltration and inflow. So we've been doing this in this town for probably the last 20 years. We go and try to locate areas where any of the sewer pipes are cracked or broken, as well as sewer manholes. And we determine where the water may be coming in from the groundwater, and then we go back and repair those pipes or manholes. So that's the work, again, that's what we were doing this year in anticipation of the following project. And we typically go to town meeting like every other year. One year we do investigation, the following year we do repairs. And that's the type of work we were doing.
Thanks. Is there any questions from the committee?
I would say the other interesting thing was the likelihood that this is partly a result of COVID, because we had so little activity in the sewers, because Sun Microsystem, that entire office complex has been empty, and all of the restaurants in that area that normally would be pushing water through that system. And so by slowing that sewer down, John, it's like probably added to the problem.
Yeah, that's correct, particularly when you have grease, because now the grease has a chance to stop and solidify in areas where typically would have just carried through all the way to our pump stations.
David?
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you, Xavier.
Just where the road was open, the pipe was open, I mean, besides the clog, nothing else you saw that was issues that we may have down the road, whether there was other investigation you could do while it was open, or really was repair it, patch it, get it Yes, so.
So it was pretty much it. The only thing we did, and I mentioned this as a subcommittee, we had to put we call it a drive well, that sometimes you have like we call it a dead catch basin or things like that. So we installed one of those as a point for dewatering. So we actually placed it strategically and we located it in case if we ever have to go back in the future, hopefully not. But at least we know what it is, because that will make it a lot easier to go back and do any dewatering. I mean, we do have 2 water mains that go nearby. We have a gas main that we have to actually, protect while we were doing the work. So it was good to have that for the future to know what it was, but that was about it. There really wasn't anything else that we needed to do there.
Phil.
Part of the problem of the water table there is the bridge and shortly downstream across from the pizza place. Is there any chance that we can dig out any of that stream? Stream cleaning? I mean, it's completely filled up now with not only debris, but it's overgrown. And that's the reason why it comes up over the bridge. It just doesn't flow fast enough.
So one of the reasons actually is happening, Phil, is that in Bedford, there was a project done years ago. And I don't know if they call it the Mill Pond, the Millbrook, or I've seen a sign there where you come on 62. And that actually controls the level of anything going upstream from there. Because we investigated this on the last big storms that we had a few years ago to find out why we were flooding in certain places. So we found that actually controls the depth going all the way upstream into Burlington. So even if we were to say dig up, which we're not allowed to, by the way, but even if we were allowed to dig it up, the control point is downstream.
Yeah, we can't get them to open the floodgates.
It's not that simple. Not that simple.
Life should be.
Roger.
Just a question. There's a lot of officers standing guard and keeping the intersection safe with all the traffic that's going through it. We ended up drawing on the Billerica and Bedford officers.
Yeah, that's not uncommon during, depending on the time of the year and how much work is happening in Burlington, we will hire, I mean, we don't hire direct. They are hired through the police department, but we hire from surrounding towns and other places as well when they're short of personnel. So,
And the police department does all that dispatching they do the selection of officers and who.
correct. So we'll say we need, say, 2 people or whatever we may need. I mean, I didn't go into detail, but during certain times, we had to actually detour the entire turnpike. I mean, we have to do a lot of traffic management. There was one night that we worked late, and obviously we're not going to leave a big hole unprotected, so we needed to keep personnel around. So that's what you see. I mean, the price tag was pretty hefty, but we definitely needed them there. And as you know, it's a very busy intersection to put.
Oh, yeah.
5 lanes of traffic on that section of Middlesex Turnpike with the right turn coming in there too.
And then with the understanding of the flow in that particular pipe, are there any other pipes in town that have a similar change in usage patterns that might be worth looking?
So we have gone to after this, we have gone to other places just to make sure that pipes are flowing. And I was saying to the subcommittee earlier, we do have a number of sections that we know we have to go back at different intervals to do regular flushing. Obviously, this was never one of them. But we have gone back to some of the areas where we know that we have less flow to make sure that it was flowing, because obviously once you see a problem happen, you want to go back and make sure. Now, have we caught every one of them? I mean, we have hundreds of miles of sewer mains in town, but there are certain places where we knew that there's less flow, there's less industry, less office workers, and maybe a pipe that doesn't carry a lot of flow. So we've gone to those. All right.
Is that process completed at this point, or is it still?
Oh, yeah, we did that. We went back at the time, and we've been seeing a little bit of an increase in people working, which is a good thing for us working here, I mean, in the town.
Yeah.
So we'll probably start to see those flows picking up.
September will probably change that quite a bit.
Yep.
The summer ending. Anything else? So just for the mechanics of this is coming from the FY21 reserve fund for Ways and Means, and at the current time, not because we haven't spent any money from it,
It's just, for the audience, we typically allocate $200,000 at the beginning of the fiscal, and we allocate another 100,000 at the January meeting. So our budget here is, because we didn't spend anything, is
300,000. So we will transfer the sum of $110,483 from the reserve fund for FY '21 to the DPW to cover the cost of the contractors and the vendors.
So just a question on that. The copy in front of me has the 300 crossed out and the 200 written in.
That's why
We did-
I made that clarification, because I think the person who crossed it out was under the impression that it was coming from FY '22 possibly, and that we only had 200,000 at that time.
Oh, okay.
Right, because
Right,
right
'cause
now
we
we
did-
only have 200,000
So
for
it is
this year.
300.
It is 300, yeah.
Because we did transfer an extra 100,000 in January.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, that's,
Okay.
there was
That's-
just some confusion, I guess, either whether it was coming from FY '21 or FY '22 or,
Right.
right. That's, and with Whitney in the room, she'll keep us honest. Frank?
Yeah, so, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So related to that, so Whitney, this is coming out of a budget that's actually closed, right?
Correct.
So, you can deal with that in terms of, because what's left goes to the free cash, but we
Yes,
haven't,
we can still.
haven't
deal
done
with
that
it.
audit. Yeah, that's okay, yeah.
Yes, we can still, deal with this up until actually tomorrow, which is why I need to have the meeting tonight.
This is why I was nervous about quorum.
So as long as, nothing crazy happens tonight, we're clear on that.
Okay, and this is the only drawdown on the FY '21,
Correct.
yeah,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
So,
So the chair will entertain a motion to transfer the sum of $110,483 from the FY '21 reserve fund to the DPW account to cover the cost of the contractors and vendors.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 9-0. I see you, Jaya.
I know, the light is blocking my face, so I just.
Oh, it's, okay. I'm not sure I can help with that. All right, thank you. And the next,
It's
Oh.
my light in my kitchen.
yep, you need a signature. And John?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I can indulge me with a few minutes to talk about PFAS, just to give the Ways and Means Committee an update on
Sorry.
what's going on and we're going to be needing in the future. So everybody at this point have heard, I hope, about PFAS, so I'm not going to go in details about what they are, what we have, and everything else. But what we need to do is we need to come up with a short-term plan and a long-term plan for DEP and what we're going to do. So we immediately started on both ends of the spectrum. So we're going to talk briefly about both of them. The long-term plan for us is to abandon the Vine Brook treatment plant. That has been the plan for many years right now, and to maintain our mill pond treatment facility. So our plan is to put filtering systems at the mill pond treatment facility to take care of the PFAS issue at that facility as well. So right now we are in the process of hiring an engineer. We put an RFQ out. We have interviews tomorrow. We actually have someone ready from some of the engineering firms. We know that the design is probably going to be about $500,000 to design the system. And we intend to use ARPA funds for that. That's the only mechanism that we have that we can actually find $500,000 to start funding a project as quickly as we like to do it. The goal is to come back to town meeting in the fall. Hopefully the project will be advanced enough at this point. We can actually ask town meeting for a certain amount of dollars, which will probably range between $5 and $10 million to actually do the work. The good news is that we've tried to find any place where we can find funding or sources of funding, and through DEP, we work to get approved to apply for emergency SRF financing. We were approved to submit an application, which typically means that they will approve us for the financing as well. And finances for this tend to be anywhere between 0 and 2%. And it's been talked also that for PFAS, they may be principal forgiveness as well. So, I mean, none of that is set in stone. There's a lot of people talking about how those funds coming from the federal government are going to be used, but there's talk that perhaps that's one of the areas where we may be able to get funding. So we went to work immediately as far as trying to get us approved in anticipation of town meeting actually authorizing us to borrow the funding. So that's the good news. The not so good news is that everybody else in Massachusetts is doing the same as we're doing right now. So the companies that make the filters throughout the United States are very busy working on that. And at the last meeting that I attended a week and a half ago, they're talking that the filters may be 20 to 40 weeks out from the time you order them, which that would put us in probably around 2023 before we have the system operational at the Mill Pond Treatment Plant. We are thinking about, we haven't hired an engineer, but we're thinking that what we may do is to split the engineering into two, order the filters ahead of the design, so we can start the clock on the filters, and hopefully by the time we get a contractor, we say, okay, these are the filters you're going to use. So we're trying to get to expedite it for obvious reasons. But even with that, we're still thinking that may be late 2022 before this work is complete. It'll be in addition to the Mill Pond Treatment Facility. Basically, that's what you'll see is a building attached to it. And they have filters similar to the ones that we have at the Vine Brook. I don't know if you've seen those, although probably much taller than those. How many of them? We don't know. I mean, we have to design it. And more than likely, there will be GAC filters, activated carbon filters, but they may be resin filters. We don't know that yet. I mean, they will be part of the design that will determine what is the best way for us to go. So that's a long-term plan. So I know that you don't like to see us coming in the fall or January asking for funding, but just giving you a heads up that I'm going to be coming in asking for funding then. On the short term, because we need to provide the best water we can to our residents, the DEP told us to open our connection to the MWRA in Lexington, the one that we just finished in December. So we are actually drawing water, and we have been drawing water from that connection since May, which is a lot longer than what we had budgeted for. So we have budgeted for 150 gallons of water, which it was 150 days out of the year. Well, now we're going to be getting water 365 days out of the year. So there's going to be an additional cost to that. Granted, there'll be savings. We're not making the water, so we're not going to spend the money on chemicals, electricity, and all the things, but there will be a delta over there as well. But that's part of what we need to do. So, so we'll work on it. We'll go through season, and probably maybe in January or even May, we may be having to come back and say we need an X amount to continue to purchase the water. Again, this is not something we have planned. If you can see our budget was submitted, it says 150 million gallons. So I know it's a little more than that. So that's that in a nutshell. I mean, if I'm here to answer any questions, but again, I didn't want to surprise anybody when I come back in the fall.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't understand how this happened. This is the DPA acting on its own arbitrarily, regardless of what the EPA says. The DEP says we have to go from 70 parts per trillion down to 20 parts across the whole state. So this is billions of dollars that are being spent by the municipalities to reduce it by 40 parts per trillion. I mean, was there any pushback? Did you get any notification? Did any of the other DPW directors in the state have objection to this?
So throughout the process, through our water associations that we have, like Mass Water Works associations and all that like that, we've been pushing back on this. At the end of the day, DEP has the authority to create whatever mass contaminant levels they decide that are appropriate for the Commonwealth, and that's what happened basically. I myself was at a meeting about a year ago with some of at that time the regulation was going to go into you can comment on the regulations. So now we go to a meeting, we're gonna start talking about it, and pretty much we're hearing, it's 20. This is what it's gonna be. And we'll say, well, I thought the whole process is that, we have to say on this, and pretty much they pushed it all the way like that. So now I don't know the science behind. I don't know how the 20 was picked. I'm not an expert at that. I do know that the 70 that the EPA has is not a contaminant level, it's more like an advisory level. So the EPA does not have a tough rule actually on it. And I believe because of that, Massachusetts and other states, we're not alone. A lot of the New England states and states across the country, they came up with their own limits on PFAS.
Somebody's father to DEP must be making filters.
Roger? You had your hand up.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so with the opening to the MWRA, what's going to be the percentage of mix between MWRA water and mill pond water?
The current or the future?
Well, steady state, like not too far in the future, the short term.
Like right now?
Yeah,
I mean, so right now, the town is using about 3 million gallons a day.
Okay.
And we've taken 1 million gallons from the.
okay, that's good, thanks.
Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm not all that familiar with this, so don't dive into details that I can get somewhere else, but does the MWRA water have the same problem?
No,
And why not?
because their source, being the Quabbin Reservoir, does not have any of the tributaries that will carry any of the PFAS.
And what is the contaminant?
Well, it's anything that, it's PFAS, it's actually in pretty much everything that we use. It's on waterproof clothing that you may have, it's in Teflon, it's in some of your cooking utensils, it's even a lipstick. I mean, it's everywhere. And unfortunately, once that you introduce it to water, it does not degrade. They call it forever chemical. So, and that's the issue. The issue is that whatever has happened over the last 30 years, a fire phone, by the way, is one of them too, items where you have PFAS and PFOS. Once it goes in the ground, once it goes in the water, you can't, it doesn't,
So we
Degrade.
get it out of the Shawshene readily.
both. We get it from our wells and we also get it from the Shawshene.
Okay, so one of the things that this raises, in my mind, John, is a longer-term issue. We're planning to keep the mill pond online essentially forever as a backup, essentially, I would assume.
It was going to be our main source of water, actually.
Even though we have essentially, at some point, the pipes will be there for unlimited access to the MWRA.
Correct. But the whole idea was when we got the project approved is that the town will have redundancy to our system. So if anything were to happen to the MWRA source, I mean, they're building redundancies and everything as we are, but we felt that it was good for Burlington to have redundancy in our own system as well.
But to me, that would be the equivalent of a backup. In other words, here's my problem. I think we're never going to see the end of having to spend money on a relatively small water supply, the Bill Pond. But to remove anything costs a lot of money every time they change the requirements and our new materials discovered. And it's not like new contaminations coming in. This stuff is already there. So we're essentially signing up to continue to upgrade Mill Pond for a long time, even though we would have another supply if we chose to use more of it or all of it. So I'm not so sure I buy in. I mean, these are very expensive. That's the whole reason we're getting out of the wells, really. It's too expensive.
So is the MWRA.
Yeah, but economy of scale has got to be better off than what we're doing.
So, and I don't have the numbers, so please do not quote me in any numbers because I don't have it with me right now. But I do know that one of the reasons we also felt that the mill pond was a good source for us is because that water produced there is a lot cheaper than the MWRA water. Now, we can't say the same about the Pine Brook treatment facility. That was very expensive water because of the pumping and everything else. But so that was, and this is why we will continue to use it as the primary source and then being supplemented by the MWRA.
So even though we have to do these periodic, pretty major upgrades, you still feel that it would be economically very advantageous to make our own.
I believe so, yes. I mean, obviously, as we go on, and by the way, we have not finished paying for the mill pond treatment plant, so we would, let's not shut it down before we finish paying for it, but,
I'm not trying to get precipitous, I'm
No,
trying to
no,
look at the big picture.
but I do think, you're correct with this, I think that as we move forward into the future, we got to think it through again. I mean, it was fairly easy with the Vinebrook because of the amount of contaminants that we already have.
Right.
So it was a very easy decision to be made. I think the mill pond will take a little longer to make that decision. Typically, by the way, PFAS levels that we've seen on surface water are not encountered on surface water. Surface water, just about every river in Massachusetts has PFAS, but not to the level that we're seeing in our source. So just to mention one chemical. So I don't know what else may be there, but yeah, we'll have to analyze it in the future and make a determination if that's the way we're going to go.
You've already touched on the first question that I had, so I won't repeat that. And then the second one, just kind of a basic, the increased cost that we're talking about drawing the addition money from the MWRA, that ultimately comes through the water and sewer rates. So ultimately, that's the typical homeowner is going to see all of a sudden rates go up quicker due to this fact.
That's correct. I mean, and that's how, again, when we did the 10-year plan with the rates increasing and all of that, it was based on a certain amount of water that we were going to buy, which it was not 100%.
You didn't have anything. Jaya?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, if I may. So the first question is, what about the surrounding towns like Lexington, Bedford, Waltham? They are also, we probably share the water tables with them. What are their requirements and how are they handling this? And the second question is, how does MWRA keep these levels down? Because whatever the waste is in here in Burlington must also happen in all other neighborhoods as well. So how do they deal with it?
So,
And-
Mr. Chairman, oh,
Yeah, sorry, no, go ahead.
okay.
Yeah,
So,
Jaya.
when it comes to, so the first question, a lot of the surrounding towns are already members of the MWRA, so they don't have their own water production. Bedford does, and some of the wells actually are very close to the Vinebrook, the Ashoshien River as well. And what they've been doing is they've been shutting down those wells and they're buying more water from the MWRA. So that's how they're dealing with it. A few other communities, they've done similar things as far as shutting down wells. The ones that can have been doing that. Some have installed temporary treatment processes because they have small wells, maybe a well that produces 500,000 gallons a day or less. So they bring the kind of a tractor trailer treatment plant and they had it there temporarily. So that's what all the communities have been doing around us, but most of them in the 128, inside 128 are MWRA communities and they don't have to worry about these issues.
It's pristine water.
Correct. And the issue is that their source of water is in Western Massachusetts, surrounded by a lot of forests and a lot of land that they have been buying over the years. So there's no development happening around it. So that's why the levels are down. They're not treating for PFAS. The water just doesn't have it as a source.
Okay.
Do you have an update on the second phase of the project to connect to the MWRA, the pipe to Arlington?
Yes, so we are actually going through the final stage of permitting in Lexington. I believe is next week. We have a meeting with them. And then we'll go out to bid at that point. We want to get their final permit so we can go out to bid to start this construction season.
Okay.
And again, it will carry us, like similar to this other repair, it will carry us into 2023. So it's a big project.
Got it. Any
One
other?
other thing, Mr. Chairman, while we're on the subject of the treatment plant, John says that that's going to likely be shut down in 2023. So I thought maybe you might ask Mr. Sagarino whether or not we would appropriate some money for a feasibility study for reuse of that building. I'm thinking police department, but we've had experience like this before, the Wildwood, Meadowbrook, with these buildings like Fallow for years. before we took any action to repurpose them. So I think we ought to get ahead of the curve on that building.
No, that absolutely makes sense. If it's a site feasible for reuse, we should definitely do that. Any further questions for John?
Well, thank you very much. Remember we had this meeting today when I come back in the fall. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, John.
Your turn.
The second set of transfers is basically inter-account transfers on the town side, and for that, I'll have to come up and talk. I'm sorry, I didn't get the DH1 to take a look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to give a little bit of background to remind everybody, historically, we've handled this through a warrant article at annual town meeting. And then a few years ago, the legislature updated the law to allow us this brief window to handle it through votes from the Finance Committee, in our case, Ways and Means, and Board of Selectmen, because as you might imagine, it's a little bit difficult to accurately predict surpluses and deficits 2 months in advance of the close of the fiscal year. So this gives us a little bit more accuracy and make sure that we're crossing all our Ts and dotting all our Is. So what you have before you tonight is a list of lines with deficits and corresponding surpluses to offset those deficits. It should be pretty straightforward, but I can answer any questions if anyone has any. And I would like to say that the fact that we were able to close out such a challenging fiscal year with so few transfers is a real testament to our departments and their staff and their accuracy in budgeting, as well as their budget monitoring throughout the year. So I would like to thank everyone for all their work and you all for your work in that manner too.
I'm sorry?
Bigger.
Yeah, I'm going to.
I read it before, but
I need to get rid of this other part of the screen. You know, got other things in the way.
The little arrow on the right,
I got it.
like that.
Something in my way.
In the scroll.
In the scroll bar, Steve.
Oh, there we go. It was, I have the speaking window from WebEx in the way.
Screen crap you don't want to see.
How's that?
thanks. I was kind of
Yes, right.
curious about the extra expenses, police and fire, what form they took.
It was just overtime happens in certain years with depending on the number of calls and whatnot we have, but these were overtime that unrelated to COVID, so it wasn't covered by CARES.
And just out of curiosity, what percentage are those numbers of the overtime budget that was budgeted? Now they've got fairly big
Yes.
departments, but
So fire, the overtime is about 1 million out of 8 million total salaries.
okay,
And police is, overtime is 600,000 out of 8.2 million in total salary.
okay.
But it's coming out of their budgets.
Yeah, so when possible, we try to cover the deficit within its own budget if we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one general question on this. So a lot of the offsets came from accounts called expenses.
Mhm.
So was it just more money in those accounts, or did we not do things? You know,
Yeah,
how
we
mix it up?
selectively tried not to spend in anticipation of this. And also, there was still some amount of things not really going back to normal yet, and, you know,
Expenses didn't.
right, trainings, still not really back up to where they were, so there's a lot of what we call melt money left over. That was a
But
big.
you don't think we're building up a big backlog of things that need to be bought, fixed, done?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, again, it's just coming back to normal now and then our next year.
That's sort of a general thing that I saw through this.
And I also, I mean, when we saw these coming, I've been monitoring this for a while, so there was some discretionary spending that I asked, could you hold off until we see what this total is gonna be? Because it's easier to fix that way.
And related to this, is there this legislation that was passed that allows us to do this way? We still have a cap on how much we can do this way?
I don't think so, no.
Really? There used to be, wasn't there?
25K.
Okay. Thank you.
Move to approve?
Is there a second? There's a motion to approve the line item transfers as documented and seconded in this document. All those in favor? I see you, Jaya.
Yeah, thank you.
9-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Yep.
And happy New Year.
Thanks.
Good to see you, John.
Glad I could help.
You got perfect timing, coming and going.
As usual.
Yep.
Say that too loud, John.
So at this point, I would introduce you to Kayla Newton, who's our new recording secretary. But she wasn't able to make it tonight because of a family emergency, so hopefully everything is okay. Thank you.
Good to hear we have a new recording secretary on staff.
Yep. So these are old minutes before the Maytown meeting. One is from April 28th, 2021, and the other is from May 5th, 2021. And these are basically a review of all the warrant article discussions that we, and other transfers that we had during that time. I think David made a note that the attendance was slightly off, so I will go and fix that. But otherwise, I have not heard any feedback, and with Mr. Eiler on vacation, he's usually the one that gives me the most feedback.
You put the Eiler eye on it, there's little stuff, but I don't think we should mess with that. I didn't see anything. I mean, you need the memory of an elephant to remember all of this, first of all. But I didn't see anything, and I did go through it quickly.
No, for the first set of minutes that she produced, I worked with her to make sure she understood what needed to happen, so she got some good feedback ahead of time, so. I think just the absentee changes, I'll just make.
I just noticed too that Bob Kuna is listed as a school committee, that's his title. Probably.
Oh, yeah. Well, earlier Roger was also mentioned as the treasurer of Ways and Means, so I was trying to figure out what that position was, but. And actually, one of the funniest mistakes was that for Chapter 90, she had $194.1 million from the state coming in as road assistance, so. We'll be digging Route 3A into the ground and having a real nice town common.
Fix the sewer pipes while you're doing it.
Yeah, no, exactly. But no, she did a great job. I don't want to detract from that. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Taylor?
I don't think we have issues with, I think everyone was here for those, so we don't have to take separate votes.
Move to approve as amended.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 9-0.
No question, do we have a new microphone arrangement? Do you have to
So-
automatically pick everything up, or do you still have to speak into it?
So there's two microphones in the room. From my understanding is that these are the normal mics that go to BCAT. The second set of mics is for the WebEx. And my understanding is that BCAT will actually pull the feed from the appropriate microphone for whichever speaker is talking better. So, or is more audible. And they'll also do that for the video. So,
Move to adjourn? Is that appropriate?
that's very appropriate, and I was gonna ask what you were waiting for. Do I have a second? We are adjourned.